Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for heart-touching stories. Don't forget to subscribe and let's begin.
The first time I met Patricia Holloway, she arrived 45 minutes late to our introductory dinner, slid into her chair like she was doing us a favor by showing up at all, and ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu before anyone had even unfolded their napkins. I told myself it was nerves. People act strangely when they're meeting their child's future in-laws for the first time. Lord knows I'd worn my good pearls, and changed my outfit 3 times before leaving the house. So I smiled, raised my glass when the Chateauneuf du Pape arrived, and decided to give Patricia Holloway the benefit of the doubt. That was my first mistake. My name is Diane Calloway. I'm 62 years old, a retired pharmacist, and I raised my son Marcus largely on my own after his father walked out when Marcus was 9. I won't pretend those years were easy. I clipped coupons until my fingers ached. I worked double shifts on holidays. I drove a car with a cracked windshield for 3 years because I couldn't justify the repair when there were school supplies and soccer cleats to buy. What I built? A modest but comfortable retirement, a paid-off home in Charlotte, a small investment portfolio. I built one careful dollar at a time. Marcus grew into a remarkable young man. Kind, hardworking, funny in that dry way that sneaks up on you. When he called to tell me he was in love with a woman named Cassandra Holloway, I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard since he was 8 years old and found a stray dog he desperately wanted to keep. Pure, unguarded joy. And so I loved Cassandra before I ever met her, simply because she put that sound in my son's voice. Cassandra herself turned out to be everything a mother could hope for. A physical therapist with a warm laugh and her mother's cheekbones, but thankfully none of her mother's habits. She looked at Marcus like he'd hung the moon, and she looked at me with a genuine warmth that made me feel welcomed into her life rather than merely tolerated. We bonded over crossword puzzles and a shared distaste for overly salted food. I adored her immediately. Patricia was another story. The pattern started subtly, the way most patterns do. At the engagement party, which I hosted, Patricia mentioned just in passing that she'd seen the most darling centerpieces at a shop downtown, but they were a little beyond her budget at the moment. The centerpieces I'd already purchased and arranged myself suddenly looked shabby to me by comparison. I didn't offer to buy them, but I noticed the comment. A few weeks later, we met for lunch to discuss wedding details. The bill came. Patricia patted her purse with a theatrical little frown. "Oh, I think I left my wallet in the car," she said. "Would you mind terribly?" I paid. I told myself it was nothing. $28, hardly worth a second thought. The thing about being treated like an ATM is that it doesn't happen all at once. It's incremental. It's a series of small transactions, each one almost justifiable on its own, that add up to something insulting before you've quite noticed the sum total. Patricia never paid for a shared meal. She mentioned financial hardship so frequently and strategically that it became a kind of background music, always present, always designed to soften the moment before she needed something. She asked me to cover her half of the bridal shower venue, just until I get my tax return. Diane. She invited herself along on a shopping trip and then stood expectantly at the register when she found a dress she loved. She asked if I could spot her for Cassandra and Marcus's first anniversary dinner reservation, a restaurant she had chosen and where she ordered the chef's tasting menu and 2 glasses of the reserve burgundy. I paid. I always paid, because the alternative, making a scene, embarrassing Cassandra, disrupting the fragile peace of a newly blended family, felt like too high a price. I told myself I was being generous. That's a more comfortable story than the true one, which was that I was being a coward, too conflict-averse to hold a boundary with a woman who had immediately recognized in me someone who would not push back. My friend Gloria, who has the bedside manner of a drill sergeant and the wisdom of someone who has been burned by every variety of human foolishness, saw through my story immediately. "Not being generous," she told me over coffee one afternoon after I'd recounted the anniversary dinner incident. "You're being farmed. That's a bit dramatic." "Diane," she ordered the tasting menu at your expense at your son's anniversary dinner to which she invited herself. Gloria set down her cup. "That woman has got you pegged as a mark and you are performing beautifully." I stirred my coffee and said nothing, which was as close to admitting she was right as I could manage. The breaking point arrived on a Saturday in October, 14 months after Marcus and Cassandra's wedding. Cassandra's birthday was the following week, and Patricia had proposed, with characteristic vagueness about logistics, a special birthday dinner at Maison Laurent, a French restaurant in uptown Charlotte that I knew, because I had looked it up immediately after she suggested it, required reservations made weeks in advance, and had an average check of around $200 per person. "Make the reservation," Patricia said brightly. "You're so good about these things, Diane, and of course we'll sort out the bill when we get there." I knew what sort out the bill meant. I had extensive experience with what it meant. There were to be 8 of us: Marcus and Cassandra, Patricia and her boyfriend Gerald, Patricia's sister Rhonda and Rhonda's husband, and 2 of Cassandra's close friends, Bea and Tomoko. I had offered to pay for Marcus and Cassandra's meals as my birthday gift to my daughter-in-law. That felt right and appropriate. 2 people, my son and his wife, a birthday celebration. What I had not agreed to fund was a dinner party for 8. I arrived at Maison Laurent at 7 o'clock on a Friday evening in a black wrap dress and the pearls I'd worn to that first dinner, because I am a woman who finds armor in her accessories. The restaurant was beautiful, hushed and golden, with white tablecloths and candles and low crystal holders, and a sommelier who spoke in a reverential whisper. Cassandra looked radiant and happy, and seeing her made me glad I had come. Then I looked at the menu. The cheapest in tray was $54. The prefix was $120 per person, not including wine. The wine list opened at $60 a bottle and climbed serenely toward the stratosphere. Patricia had already, I noticed, waved the sommelier over. The dinner itself was lovely. I will give Patricia that. Whatever her many flaws, the woman has taste, and she had chosen a restaurant that deserved its reputation. The food was extraordinary. The conversation was warm and full of laughter. Cassandra blew out the candle in her creme brulee and looked genuinely uncomplicated happy, and I tucked that image away carefully, separate from what was coming. What was coming arrived with the check. The sommelier placed it in the center of the table in a small leather folder. There was a moment, I have replayed it many times, where everyone seemed to hold their breath. Patricia reached forward, flipped the folder open, widened her eyes slightly at the total, and then looked directly at me with an expression of such practiced helplessness that I almost admired it. "Diane," she said with a soft, regretful smile, "I'm so embarrassed, but Gerald and I have had such an unexpected month financially. I fully intended to contribute tonight, but I'm just—" She trailed off with a small, expressive shrug. "You know how it is. $1,047. That was the number in the leather folder. I know because I looked. I had told myself on the drive over that I would look, that I would not avert my eyes from the number the way I had been averting my eyes from the entire dynamic for well over a year. $1,047, which Patricia Holloway expected me to absorb as casually as I had absorbed $28 lunches and split shower venues and anniversary tastings menus, because I had trained her through consistent spineless compliance to expect exactly that. I closed the leather folder. I folded my hands on top of it, and then I said with a pleasantness that surprised even me, "I'm so sorry to hear that, Patricia. I'm happy to cover Marcus and Cassandra's portion as my gift to Cassie." I opened the folder again, calculated what their meals and one shared dessert had come to, and placed my card inside. The rest I'm sure everyone can sort out amongst themselves. Silence that followed was a specific kind of silence. The kind with texture. Patricia stared at me. I watched the helpless smile flicker and recalibrate, searching for a new angle. "Well, I just thought, given how generous you've always been, I've been happy to treat on special occasions," I said. "Tonight I'm treating my son and daughter-in-law for her birthday. That feels like the right amount." Gerald suddenly became very interested in splitting their portion with Rhonda and her husband. Bea and Tomoko, bless them, had already quietly placed their cards on the table with the cheerful efficiency of people who had never expected anyone else to pay for their dinner. The remainder was sorted out in about 4 minutes, none of which were comfortable for Patricia Holloway. She didn't speak to me for 3 weeks after that dinner. I received a message through Cassandra, which I thought was a particularly elegant touch, that Patricia was hurt by the change in dynamic. I wrote back, through no intermediary at all, just a simple text to Patricia's number. "I've always valued our family relationship. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page going forward about finances. I'm happy to treat on occasions where I've specifically offered to do so. I hope you understand." She did not respond. Cassandra called me 2 days later, slightly awkward, clearly not wanting to be placed in the middle. "She's my mom," Cassandra said. "I love her. But Diane, I also know what she's like. I've known what she's like my whole life." That sentence, delivered quietly and without drama, told me everything about what Cassandra had grown up with. It also told me why she had grown into someone so genuinely warm and ungrasping herself. Sometimes children raised by takers become the most ferocious givers in self-determined rebellion. "Not trying to cause problems," I told her. "Not causing problems," Cassandra said. "You're just the first person in a long time who didn't let her get away with it." "That's an adjustment for her," she paused. And honestly, watching it happen kind of made me want to stand up and clap. I laughed so hard I had to put the phone down. Things shifted after that. Not dramatically. Patricia is not a woman given to grand transformations, but perceptibly. She stopped suggesting restaurants. She stopped engineering group outings where the bill could be redirected toward me. When we did have family dinners, usually at Marcus and Cassandra's house, she brought a bottle of wine which she ostentatiously showed to the room upon arrival. It was a $12 bottle. I said thank you warmly every time. What I learned, arriving on the other side of that dinner, is something I wish someone had told me at the very beginning. People will treat you the way you demonstrate you're willing to be treated. That's not a blame assignment. Patricia's behavior was her own choice, her own small moral failing. But my tolerance of it was my own. I had been so determined to keep the peace, so afraid that enforcing a basic financial boundary would be interpreted as meanness or stinginess or some kind of maternal rivalry, that I had simply handed her a blank check and acted surprised when she used it. Generosity is a virtue. I believe that genuinely. I was raised to believe it, and I've tried to live it. But generosity has to be chosen freely and without coercion, or it isn't generosity at all. It's just extraction dressed up in social niceties. What Patricia had been doing wasn't accepting my generosity. She was manufacturing a context in which I felt I had no choice. Those are not the same thing, and I should have understood the difference much sooner. My son Marcus, when I eventually told him the full extent of it over a Sunday dinner, just the two of us, after Cassandra was aware I intended to tell him, went very quiet in the particular way he has when he's angry and choosing his words carefully. I should have seen it, he said. I hid it from you. Why? Because you love Cassandra and she loves her mother, and I didn't want to be the thing that made any of that harder. He was quiet again for a moment. Then, Mom. You know that's not how this works, right? You're allowed to have limits, even with people who are connected to people we love. 40 years of motherhood and he still manages to say the exact right thing. The last time I saw Patricia at Christmas at Marcus and Cassandra's house, she hugged me hello with the particular warmth of someone who has accepted a renegotiated treaty. It wasn't effusive. It wasn't the manufactured sweetness of those early months when she'd been assessing what she could get. It was something more honest and therefore, in a strange way, more comfortable. "Merry Christmas, Diane," she said. "Merry Christmas, Patricia," I said. We stood together by the window and watched Marcus and Cassandra slow dancing in the kitchen to a Christmas song while the turkey rested on the counter, and we were both, despite everything, smiling. Some people will never change completely, but occasionally. When you stop letting yourself be used, they surprise you by becoming something more like their actual selves, imperfect, flawed, maybe a little embarrassed about the whole business, but real. $1,047 was, when I think about it now, the best money I ever almost didn't spend. The lesson was worth every penny.